sir. Good. Good.
So, anyway, that's what's made it hard.
We could call everybody to order, please.
We got a great board now. There's only
We could call everybody to order, please.
chairs. We're open, transparent.
Yeah.
I know.
We gotta get him.
Hey, call it to order, please.
I'll bring a hammer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, calling to order. We will get started with the meeting. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the meeting minutes from our February 14th meeting. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Today, we are very lucky. We've got Tony Pratt joining us. He is an outstanding Delawarean who's been involved with consulting and Denarec and a multitude of different positions. He's a Delaware coastal consultant specializing in coastal erosion and sediment deposition issues, sea level rise impacts, coastal community resilience, and coastal government affairs. He has served as the administrator of the Shoreline and Waterway Management Section within Denarec and is currently retired after 38 years with Denarec, quite a long time. He's also served as president and executive director of the National American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. He is currently executive director of the Bay Beach Association, which is the Delaware Bay Beach Association, and consults as well for the Delaware coastal beach communities, pretty much all of them, including Bethany Beach. He helped us out with a little phone call here just a week or so ago. Tony today will be discussing his opposition to the Denarec replenishment cost-sharing study, his strong support for the seaside to statewide economic study, as well as touching base on his perspective of our local exposure to sea level rise and climate change. Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you would step up to the podium, or
Oh, I can do that.
would that be okay?
I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
I have no notes, so don't worry. I'm just going to talk.
He's good at that.
Speak into the microphone. Can everybody hear me all right from right here? All right. Ron, that was, I've probably taken up all my allotted time just from the introduction. I don't know how long I've got to talk here, but I appreciate everybody coming out today. Bethany's a subject matter that I've been involved with since around 1980. I started working for Denarec in 1980 and have been through numerous storms, seen the breach, the ocean dune up there breach. We actually, before we had a dune, saw this old town hall flooded because of ocean flooding from a northeaster. Have seen plentiful amounts of flooding over here from the canal side. And I know what you all are here today for is to try to get a handle on mitigating against any disaster in the future that we can guard against. And it's a broad topic: climate change, sea level rise, any number of things create a series of hazards. I'm going to talk exclusively about water today, water hazards, flood hazards, and there's two types of that. I will get into, it'll segue into the Denarec study that was conducted over the last 2 years that I was an advisory committee member of, and I'll talk a little bit about the valuation study that we have before us that the mayor has sitting on his desk over here. In general, Bethany is very fortunate. The early development of Bethany was because there was no bay to cross to get here. It was landmass coming in, and there is no bay behind, unlike Dewey Beach and South Bethany and Fenwick and Ocean City and many communities up and down the eastern seaboard. You do not have a bay that floods you from the bay side. You do have a connection to the bays through the Loop Canal and the Aswam Canal, and that does create problems out there. During my stay at Denarec, we did see the final construction of the beach and dune system that now gives you ample protection from the ocean side. Prior to that, every northeaster was possibly going to be the one that came through the streets and flooded everything downtown, and then, of course, the bay met from the other side, and you'd have a continuation of water all the way through. We have relieved the ocean pressure to a large degree. There was no dune in front of the boardwalk, there now is. 2007, I believe that was originally constructed, off the top of my head, my memory on that one. Lived through that first initial construction. The dune was too high, it settled down, now we seem to have a view back. The current issue that you're facing currently, and we tend to manage our disasters and our threats on a human time frame. What's the next 5 to 10 years? What are we looking at? We should be looking much further down the road than that, but right now, the problem that has to be corrected is the flooding that occurs over here on what was originally a very low part of the community. It floods in from the Assawan, and I've been working with the town manager and with the mayor very closely now for the couple of years on the dam that is proposed to go into the Loop Canal. And we're working on trying to find a way to make that happen. This administration, Denmark's new secretary, Greg Patterson, is far more interested in listening. I'll be very careful how I say this. Far more interested in listening to community problems and trying to find resolution to those problems. So I think we have an encouraging path forward on that. Breaking news for the mayor and for the town manager. I had a conversation with the Corps on Friday. The Back Bay study, which you may or not know about, I'll give you a brief history of that. After Hurricane Sandy, because of the impacts, particularly in New Jersey and Long Island, the Corps of Engineers, North Atlantic Division, based out of New York, that covers Norfolk and Baltimore and Philadelphia and New York and on up to Boston, those district offices decided to take on, through Congress's initiatives, a back bay study, looking at all of our back bays and what's flooded in there. Secretary Garvin took a long time, but he finally signed the project partnership agreement on that. Senator Carper's office last year in legislative action was able to reduce the cost sharing on that, which requires a new partnership agreement. But in talking with the Corps just the other day, as they proceed on their benefit cost analysis to get to the next PPA, we call it the project partnership agreement, for the whole Back Bay system, Little Assawoman, Indian River Bay, Rehoboth Bay, and of course the Assawoman Canal. There are a series of actions that they want to take. It would be looking spatially, community-wide, and more than just individual towns, looking at whole spatial areas. And one of the areas that they're looking at very carefully right now is gating off the Assawoman Canal, which would take care of your problem without having to worry about the Loop Canal. So that is something that they will be looking at a little bit more in earnest. So as we proceed with an individual Loop Canal flood hazard control system, we might be looking at something which is more holistic, which is taking the entire Assawoman Canal, which would help Assawoman Bay, going down into the big ditch to Ocean City, getting that off. And you can actually control tides and flooding during an event with those kind of applications. And this is being done globally quite a bit. There's actually a proposal to perhaps gate off the Hudson River entrance into New York. There is a proposal to actually gate off Manasquan Inlet in New Jersey. And there's consideration, probably not going to happen, gating off Indian River Inlet, but it's 100 feet deep. That's very difficult to do. So I'm ambling around here a little bit. We have some solutions in front of us that might come forward between the Assawoman and the Loop Canal damming process. I think we'd like to see the project go forward on the inland bays, complete bay study, to see where that is in the next 6 or 8 months, to see which of those makes some more sense to pursue. We'll pursue both of those independently. I'm concerned with out there. I've always been more concerned about the beach. What happens here is what's called still water flooding. It rises and it goes. It gets everybody wet, which is really a problem. Everything stays wet. We can have mold and mildew issues. But velocity waters coming across the ocean are much more problematic. They tend to push sideways and they destruct a whole lot faster than water that goes up and down. Water going sideways at velocity is very problematic. We have had the fortunate occurrence since 2007 to see every 2 to 3 years that project be maintained by the Corps of Engineers. The cost sharing on that has also changed recently from 90% federal and 10% local, which is great for the state of Delaware, who pays the 10%. It's a more burden on the federal government that's having difficult times coming up with the money to pay for everything. The continuing resolution budget that went forward by Congress a couple months ago to the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of September, reduced the Corps of Engineers budget nationwide for all activities by 45%. Rehoboth Dewey was supposed to be done this year. It's been put off for a year. You're supposed to be, I think, next year. We'll see what happens. But we should all be very concerned about the ability of the federal government to continue to maintain that beach up there. And they predicate that ability to maintain that beach on an analysis that said if we don't maintain it, and Bethany and South Bethany and Fenwick and Dewey and Rehoboth and Lewis and on up the bay, if they have to suffer the consequences of a storm and we have to recover from that, how much does that cost versus how much to mitigate against that? And that's called a benefit cost analysis. It's a very favorable analysis that the amount of response and recovery and human suffering far exceeds the costs of mitigation. So we have to keep that conversation going. In order to do that, we look at economic valuation studies. DENREC was very much hell-bent on deciding that the local communities needed to pay their share of the cost of benefit of nourishment across the state. This was a personal reflection of the past secretary and his thoughts that the local communities are not paying sufficiently into the maintenance of these projects. That was his personal feeling. He pursued it with a study that was very biased in that direction. It was based on an assumption that communities should be paying, communities that have never been asked to pay, communities that don't have anything budgeted or a source of income to pay for that. But they very much decided it's okay, it's a no-brainer, you should be paying, we just have to figure out how much. There was, and I will tell you that part of my background is I've been an adjunct professor at the University of Delaware in marine policy, sitting on economic valuation studies students. I've been an advisory committee on those for many years, conducted 3 or 4 studies myself under DENREC, and had a lot of experience with this. We had a number of people, I'm not going to mention who they are, we had 7 or 8 people that were on the advisory panel for that study for DENREC, and at the end of it, we all raised our hands and said, do not put our names on this study. We don't support it. We don't like the outcome of this. We don't think you've done a fair job. Your assumptions going in were wrong. One of the things I would say, if we had never nourished this beach out here with an erosion rate of 3 to 4 feet per year, and the advance of the ocean over the last almost 20 years, 18 years of 3 to 4 feet, we would see the first line of houses probably in the water at this point. What's the cost of that? They didn't enumerate that. And that would have been borne by a state and federal government response, because that's typically what happens. That's who's burdened with the response and recovery costs. So that study, I think we should consider to be not one we want to see forward. I think the better study is the one that Bethany's helped support, that looked at the evaluation of the economy of the tourist industry that's based on all these beaches and the quality of the coast itself. So I'm rambling now. I don't know what else I can present, but I'd be glad to answer questions at this point. Anybody has any questions about what we have? I think we have to be careful about, my sense of the vulnerability of Bethany is looking at obviously the loop canal and making sure that tracks forward, but also protecting the investment in that beach and dune system up there. And you're lucky that you don't have a bay behind you, but you do have access through the loop canal itself. So I think that's about what I wanted to present. And I've thrown a lot out here, but I'd be glad to have a dialogue on this, any of it at all.
Was it, you had discussions with the Corps of Engineers about this? Are they starting back up the bay, the Back Bay study?
Yeah, the Back Bay study, the process that goes with a Back Bay study is that they have to do an internal evaluation as to what would be the feasibility study, how much that would cost, and how much do they see the benefit cost analysis being a beneficial benefit of cost versus what benefit comes out of it. They have a term, I will do some core speak for you, they have what they call the vertical team. It's the Philadelphia District, reports to the North Atlantic Division in New York. North Atlantic Division reports to headquarters. That's the vertical team. The vertical team is looking right now at their draft proposal, what they think they've got a whole list of things. I can't share with you what it is, but they do have a whole list of activities with appropriate, approximate costs going forward, how much it will cost to scope out a feasibility report and do a, they've got enough analysis already from the old cost sharing, but they've got to adjust it to the 90-10 cost sharing now. So they're moving forward on that and hope to have some answers and resolutions in the next few months on that one.
So Tony, at our first meeting, we did actually have a meeting regarding the Back Bay with stakeholders in the Corps, I guess a year and a half ago now. And we offered Bethany, because we've been at this for a long time trying to deal with our problem, the idea that they gate Whites Creek and they gate 54 at the confluence of the Little Asselman and the Large Asselman. Is that what you're saying they're now looking at or considering?
They're looking geographically in regions as to how you can take some actions, and it's a general association. They did not specifically tell me Whites Creek or
Sure.
that, but looking at the advantages of for instance, Whites Creek or the Asselman Canal, if we gated that off, how much would we protect? So they're throwing spaghetti against
Sure.
the wall at this point, but that is all part of the consideration. They have any number of activities that they're looking at to say, what should we go forward with?
And one of the other things we walked away with after that meeting was the idea the process is at least 4 years from the time they accept an idea and then develop the concept before it's actually brought to fruition. Is that 3 to 4 years?
We didn't talk about timeframes,
Okay.
but historically, that is the problematic
Right.
with the Corps, is that they do take a long time to get stuff done. I don't know if the current fiscal climate from the federal government gives them an impetus to go faster or to slow down. Playing North Atlantic Division has to look at all of New York, New Jersey, Delaware, what all the activities are going on and where to distribute the money. I can't tell you how long it would take, but we would keep up the advocacy to move it as quickly as possible.
And you've always had a great relationship with our congressional delegation. What's your feel about replenishment and funding, or does no one know here?
It's R's versus D's. We have 3 D's in our capacity. I don't know. I really don't know. As we know, it's confusing week to week as to what is favorite in government versus what's not favorite in government. They have not really, the current administration and DOJ has not hit on mitigation funding directly, but they're reducing a lot of the science side of things. The Corps, for the most part, Corps of Engineers, when I talk about a 45% reduction nationwide, their primary charge is navigation, and that's what takes a big hit. Flood control is another big one. Reservoirs, they have reservoirs and water control structures all over the middle part of the country and the West Coast. It's hard to say who's taking the biggest hit on that. I think we do have a powerful voice. The midterm elections will determine a lot as to the direction of where things could be going, so we're a year and a half out from that. So it's a wait and see, but right now they still have the money to go forward with it. So we get everything positioned as best we can to take advantage of when, not if, but when it would come to fruition that we can move forward as rapidly as possible. The beaches worry me because we've been extremely fortunate with the leadership of Senator Carper, who chaired Environment and Public Works Committee. Senator Blunt Rochester is on that committee, but she's a very junior member. So we'll see how things pan out, but it's appropriations, and Chris Coons is very much involved in that, so.
My concern would be timing. They don't have a very good record on this. When did they first start meeting on the Back Bay study? I mean, this was
The Back Bay
years ago.
study, the funding happened right after Sandy. So it's been ongoing that long. Delaware pushed back
Yeah.
to the point in time that we've just right at the very beginning of it here, so.
This Back Bay study, there was some preliminary work done, and Cliff's right that the funding mechanism was Sandy reserves. There was $50 billion appropriated in emergency supplementals after Hurricane Sandy for up and down the eastern seaboard, and there was a major management document put forward by the Corps. And part of the realization is that the back bays have a tremendous impact on flood hazards, flood contact, and especially in New Jersey. New Jersey was the model; they went out first. Maryland, I think, is gone. I don't know about New York, but Delaware, because the last administration did not move on it, did not decide. When I left 7 years ago, and I thought we were lined up to start it that year, and it was the first year of the Carney administration, and during this 7 years, the subsequent 7 years, nothing really moved on it at all. A variety of reasons. I don't think they were valid, but that's just my outside look on it. At this point, we have a lot of support, and one of the advantages we have politically right now is that Senator Carper's right-hand man, John Kane, who was the lead staff on EPW, Environment and Public Works Committee, now works in the governor's office, and is part of his assignments and duties are to keep active with federal agencies and federal activities. He and I talk all the time. We're close. We see each other and talk about these things a lot. He's drawn in another direction right now, but he's understanding that these are initiatives that have to go forward. And so if there's any belt tightening, we have to think about where the belt will be tightened and where it won't.
Questions? Go ahead.
First, I'd like to make one point. Unless they go in for a waiver or an exception, the Corps is supposed to finish a feasibility study in 3 years. Now, waivers and exceptions are very common. I recall approving a number of them in my old job before I retired. This is a big project, so I'll be surprised if they stick to the 3 years, but that's their goal. What really bothers me, I'm sure bothers a lot of you, is the Corps of Engineers already is losing some 4,000 people. And you may say, okay, out of 30,000, is that a big deal? Well, it can be. You know why? First of all, a lot of the experts, the people who have been around 20, 30 years, who can really expedite and get things done quickly for projects like beach renourishment or the Back Bay study, they're being offered the early retirement package, and they're taking it because they're afraid things might get worse. Others that were ready to or eligible to retire but thought they'd hang in for 3 or 4 years, many of them are saying, we're done. One of the primary reasons for that is there's a section in the Reconciliation Act that's going to change retirement benefits significantly and health insurance, and people are not wanting to take that risk, so all of a sudden they're getting ready to pull the plug. Annuities will be cut maybe up to a third for some folks if they don't get out before July. So I understand the Corps is also losing permitters and dredgers. The union folks that do the dredging, if you got nobody to run your dredges, that could be a problem. And if you don't have enough regulators left to process permits or do the environmental impact studies that go along with either the Bladder Dam project or the Doom Renourishment project, that causes delays. So there's a lot of things at play that are out of our control. They're certainly not the Corps' fault. EPA's got the same problem. DOT has the same problem. FEMA has the same problem. In fact, theirs might be worse. If you've read the press, there are folks that are talking about eliminating FEMA. Where that mission will go, I don't know. So I very much appreciate your perspective, and I learned a lot, but I just thought I'd get a couple of those facts on the table, at least things that I'm aware of, and I'd appreciate it. Do you think I'm pretty much right on those things?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have been, no longer. It just got canceled 2 weeks ago. Been an advisory member of a mitigation panel that exists down at UNC Chapel Hill, funded through Homeland Security, looking at flood hazards, coastal flood hazards, flood predictions, or those things. Their grant was eliminated on a Thursday and told that as of midnight Thursday, no more expenditures. They have professors and students all over the Eastern Seaboard studying under those grant monies, which have been significant. Homeland Security, of course, is the agency that runs FEMA, and there seems to be targeted a lot of that kind of activity. There is a question about whether FEMA and EPA continue to exist. They are agencies, they're not independent. Congress does not seem to have enough backbone to stand up and defend those entities right now. We're waiting to see, I think we're all waiting to see, but I heard today USGS has a major program in USGS that's going to be eliminated. NOAA has many things being eliminated. Our weather service is being diminished. Our ability to predict storms, which are strengthening, getting larger because of the temperature differential. Any number of things coming together to reconstitute those historic and long-lived programs. If they were to be diminished and lost in the corporate knowledge is gone, is almost impossible to get back. And it's happening in the state for whatever reason. My old program that I was the administrator of had at one point as many as 32, 33 employees in it. I was talking to somebody the other day. When I left 7 years ago, we'd had people who've been there for 20, 25, 30 years. In that entire program of 33 people, I know 2. That's all I know from that group I left 7 years ago. Everybody else is a new face in 7 years. There's no corporate knowledge. They haven't been through these storms on the ocean coast before the Nourishment Project. There isn't a single person. There's one person in the DENREC office that's been through the storms from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. Nobody else has ever experienced any. And you know, if you haven't lived through it, you haven't been in it and had to prepare it right after that, you just really don't know what it takes to get that done. And I think the great example, if I want to use a bad example, a good bad example, north side of Indian River Inlet.
Yeah.
Nobody saw the flag raised when that was a problem coming, and I kept calling and telling them, you've got a big problem up there, and waited till it washed onto the highway, and then there was a problem. So we're losing. I hate this. We're turning from really getting a proactive position in government. We are reverting right back to that very old reactive only. We will only react to things. We will not proactively avoid those things. Let the disaster occur and somehow build back. And that's the last thing you want to have happen. The expenses are terrible. I was on a panel in D.C. many years ago on the Heinz Center, which is kind of a think tank, and they invited me to be part of a group that looked at the actual cost of coastal hazards. This goes back 25 years ago, and we used Hurricane Andrew in Florida as the example. And it's proven to be the case afterwards. We had a social anthropologist or social worker that was on our group. She taught sociology, and she looked at South Florida after the storm. And what you never hear about is, and you never see it monetized, in other words, converted to what does this mean in a monetary sense, because there's not direct money involved in it, but every single one of these natural disasters, whether it's a coastal storm, a hurricane, a tornado, a fire, whatever it is, the social impact that never gets monetized is the divorce rates, the illness rates, the sickness rates, the mental health rates, the suicide rates that all escalate tremendously in a disaster area for years following the disaster. That's what we want to avoid, more than just the house loss. We want to avoid the social impacts that are never really counted on. But that's the big one, to me. It's what it does to society and what it does to individuals, what it does to families, what it does to businesses. And it puts a lot of people out of work, and it creates a lot of social problems, which we know how to avoid it. The number that's used pretty commonly is for every $1 of mitigation funds, mitigation being building your dune, building the bladder dam, whatever it might be, $1 spent saves somewhere between $7 to $15 in response and recovery. And that's pretty commonly quoted. That's what we're trying to keep intact, but that's what's in danger.
I got a question for you, Tony, because this sounds so doom and gloom. I'm getting a little worried.
It's time to get worried. It is time to get worried.
If the current attitude of neglect and cutting out money from the budget for stuff that we would normally see, like the dune replenishment, and we get hit with a hurricane, the storm, the nor'easter, the double nor'easter, whatever happens, where that dune is no longer a barrier, and the passage of water into our streets happens.
It would be, as of today, and all I can tell you what today is still the same process, because we're seeing it out west in declaration of emergencies. Although this president has been not as quick to grant emergency status. Usually it's appealed. Well, the process that works out is that following a disaster, coastal, East Coast, and you know, remember, we're not California coast. We're not 3,000 miles of coastline. We're part of the original 13. So when a storm hits, it's not just Delaware, it's not just Bethany. It's usually North Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, New England, and we're all in a sort of a group together, and everybody gets hit. And we all do an evaluation immediately. Do we have the ability to recover financially? Can we recover from what has happened? What can we build it back to the way it was and spend the money? And the first thing that happens is the county says we don't have the money. The state says we don't have the money, which is true. And then you turn to the federal government through FEMA and through the Delaware Emergency Management Agency, and you seek a declaration through the delegation. You seek a declaration of emergency status. That's how the process is supposed to work. Then it's usually the job of the Congress to actually create what's called a supplemental. These emergencies are not part of the normal order budget. You don't say, oh, Bethany's going to have an emergency this year. That's not a part of the budget. So you go through an emergency supplemental. The supplemental for Sandy was billions, is 60, whatever I said, or 45, 50 billion. I've forgotten the number now. Maybe $60 billion. That was for the entire affected region, which started with Puerto Rico, I think. It was partly there, too. It's hard to say at this point whether that traditional process would be followed anymore. Right now, it's still what's supposed to happen. And what I see out west with the fires in California and Los Angeles, what I see with tornadoes that have been hitting, that those same declarations are going through the same process, and there is an emergency response recovery. The one thing that government seems to be pretty good at is showing up the day after the event. And everybody wants to stick their smush out there and say, I was there and I toured it, the president's there, the governor's there, the senators are there, everybody's there. And that provides a little motivation to go forward and actually, you know, put some rubber on the road. But that's crossing the fingers that that's what continues. I don't know, you know. It's hard to say, but we should all be a little bit more concerned than we were 5 years ago.
There's deep red states in the South that aren't getting that kind of FEMA relief now, that want it desperately. So if they can't get it,
You know as much as I do at this point. I can't tell you. Reading the tea leaves, it does not look that great. Whether that's going to continue for another year or two, we don't know. You know, there might be a corrective action in a couple of years. It might be enough. We've done enough. We're gonna resume normal order. I just don't know. I just don't know. I know we have a governor and a secretary who are very keyed into coastal protection. I served on the transition committee for the governor. I was asked, you know, not that I was necessarily out there campaigning. It didn't get it from political means, but I was asked because of the things I've done to be on the transition committee. And one of the first orders of business for the natural resources side of the House that I was on a subcommittee on was coastal communities and resiliency. And so this governor has it very much on their agenda and on their attention, on the radar screen. I will say this, you know, with great confidence that it doesn't go beyond this room because nobody here is going to speak after we leave here. We get attention the day after the storm. Leading up to the storm, it's still hard to get attention. Government still chases its tail most of the time. What's the problem today? What problem are we chasing? We have a brand new governor in the middle of his first legislative session with a budget that originated with the last governor, and he to take it over, and he's trying to defend what he wants to get done. We will see the fiscal year begins anew in July 1st for the state of Delaware. My experience over many governors, Pete DuPont was governor when I started working. I've seen many governors in the transition. Typically the spring is always difficult between new General Assembly members, the new governor, new staff, new cabinet, everything. Everybody's trying to get their way through the legislative session. And we'll know come August, September, October what the new governor's budget really looks like, and what the General Assembly and he have worked out as far as where they want to go forward. And that's a big part of it. How are we going to invest in the continued protection that we've all counted on for so many years? So that's kind of the work we have to do in the next 5 or 6 months. make sure our presence is there, make sure we have a face up in the conversation, and make sure that we're, looking for, advocating for a continuation of that level of protection that affords everybody a good night's sleep.
The one comment that I disagree with is you're saying the county has no money.
Mhm.
I've heard that Sussex County has $50 million in the reserve. They can do an awful lot with. Does that ring a bell? Does that sound like the right number?
Yeah, when I say that, so it's the way we appeal to FEMA and the federal government coming in and responding. When it comes to a specific emergency response budget unit, the state and the county will turn their hands up and say, we don't have the money. Whatever the county's doing with that reserve, I can't speak about, I can't speak to. It's their, whatever they're deciding to do with it, but there is cash availability. The state of Delaware, just to give you a very quick, how do we get where we are? The state is 100% the non-federal sponsor for Corps of Engineers work in the state of Delaware. And how we got here was that after the '62 storm, the Corps of Engineers came forward with a study that was called Operation 5 High. It was 5 high tides. And the Corps of Engineers proposed a very huge, massive project from the tip of Cape Henlopen up into to the state line at Maryland and Fenwick Island down there. A dune complete through the whole thing, crossings here and there, and the state said at that time, we can't afford, the state was about to go under financially. So they said, we can't possibly afford to cost share this. And the Corps came back a number of years later. It kind of upset them to the point they did all this work, and the state said, we can't help you. It actually went from the late 60s into the early 80s. When I was actually just started working in DENREC, that conversation got renewed, and the state had taken on the position that we will be the non-federal sponsor. And when Ocean City started in 1998, I think it was, somewhere around there, the non-federal portion of the expenditure, which in Delaware is 100% state, takes care of the non-federal portion. Normally in your project, 35% of the cost of nourishment is covered by the state, because that's what the state of Delaware chose to do. In Ocean City, the 35% of the Ocean City project is split 3 ways. The non-federal portion, half of that is paid for the state of Maryland, 1/4 was paid by Worcester County, and 1/4 was paid by Ocean City. And Mike Castle, in a project, in a proposal that we had gone forward, proposed that we have a sort of a similar split. And George Bunning at the time was representative, and he didn't like the local communities being burdened with having to pay the cost sharing at all. The state should pay for it. So he promoted legislation that dedicated 2% of the accommodations tax, 1% of the accommodations tax to beach preservation work. And so 1% of the statewide occupation tax, hotel motel tax, goes to beach preservation. Last time I was paying attention to it 7 years ago, we were generating about $4 or $5 million a year from that fund alone. It's probably up a little bit from there. It's tempting to think about, the state is tempted to think about expanding it to Airbnbs, things of that nature. But the studies that I conducted, economic studies I conducted when I was administrator, we looked at continuing the state funding mechanism, 100% state funding, and we looked at the way we could accommodate, we could take more out of the accommodation tax, and maybe even set up even a taxing district for some of the businesses that up and down, the tempting to think about the outlets up here, that tremendous benefit of all the people here are here for coastal benefits, but then go shopping and then go eat at restaurants. So the numbers are being thought about, but right now it's usually on the state side to take care of it. As Cliff has pointed out to me, it's a blessing and a burden what happens here in the summer. You have a lovely time for everybody who comes to visit, and family and friends, and the businesses do well. But you know, the burden on the community to fund activities for 3 or 4 months out of the year that you don't have to continue for 12 months. The amount of trash pickup, the advance on the police and the lifeguards, any number of issues that are just seasonal. It's very difficult for a town the size of Bethany to manage that element and not tax the heck out of all of you all to pay for that coverage and keep people around for a lot longer. So it's a dilemma, there's no question. Yep.
those the intention of those generally to help with drainage? Benefit. I think a lot of our concern happens to be from the big bodies of water around us, but there's also a big body of water in the sky too. And so, stormwater is coming at us from a lot of different angles now. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on, whether or not these proposed kind of improvements to the Assawoman Canal would help the communities who drain into the canal, whose stormwater drains into the canal.
Yeah, unfortunately not. They're primarily and almost exclusively designed to hold tidal water back, because that's the big thing that they can control through a bladder dam. Unless the receiving body of water, the bays or the canal, are significantly lower than the land around it, and during a coastal storm, it is typically not. It's either as high or even higher than the land around. Getting it off of the land has to be almost in a flatland location like we are here. If you're in the hills of Vermont, that's different, and then you got a different problem altogether, right? But flatland flooding, it takes either time or mechanical means to get it away from that and into the receiving body of water. If the canal is at this level and your land is flooded at this level, it doesn't flow horizontally. It's got to be the differential. That's what makes it flow.
Tony, if I might, I would say Bethany Beach, specifically 90% plus of our flooding is tidal in nature. Very little is stormwater. Basically, we can handle stormwater probably within a 24-hour period. One of our measures is, if your puddle is there but gone in 18 to 24 hours, then things are effectively working, given how close we are to sea level. The bladder dam we're talking about for Bethany, if it's activated properly, and we know we're going to have a deluge from the heavens, we can activate it when the tide is low, and it can act as a basin. So that sort of thing would work, but that's specific to what we're talking about here in Bethany Beach.
Yes. Yeah.
In reference to the Corps of Engineers in your study, we're hearing it's possibly 3 to 5 years before that's done. Now we have a study, okay? Now you have another 3 or 4 or 5 years before we design, fabricate, and install that hardware. We have to have money to do all that. We're looking at possibly 10 years to do a large study and everything. So it behooves us as Bethany Beach to proceed as quickly as we can, in which Clip is spearheading this bladder dam to at least protect us from this flooding. Is that an assumption is correct?
Yeah, no, that's as best as we can tell. Yeah, the core process, despite the fact that it's the advantage of a 90% federal expenditure versus 10% not, does take a lot of time, and it's competitive. It's got to look at all the projects around the country, and is this the one that rises to the top? I mentioned it probably not significantly enough, but I think we don't abandon the bladder dam project. You move forward on both fronts, and somewhere down the line, as we're looking at acceptance and permitting and land acquisition, all the things that have to occur for that to go forward, then the funding of the building. At that time, as we're getting ready to go forward with funding and construction, where is the other project, and is it just going to only buy us 2 years, and then who knows, right? So you measure both as they're progressing. You go side by side, and you proceed with both.
But from what I see from our standpoint in Bethany, for our protection, the best move for us to do is, as quickly as possible, get that dam installed. Because the federal government, besides money and design and everything, is going to take a minimum of 10 years. And by that time, who knows where the sea level is going to be?
I think so. We don't have enough honest facts about how much was done under the last administration with the Corps and with the state, and what they're catching up with now. Typically, a feasibility study goes 2 years. My experience has been 2 years for a feasibility study. At the end of the feasibility study, you look for what's called a chief's report and get that included in a Water Resource Development Act, and they go forward with construction and construction drawing. It may be more like 5 or 6. Who knows? It's that's the uncertainty of this administration. I'm talking previous experience under other presidential administrations where things went a little bit more smoothly. I do know that personally, when we in the state and I was part of that in Denrick, stamped our feet and held our breath a little bit more than we had before. We got progress a little bit faster, and we were able to take our delegation and the powers that the delegation had. Right now, fact of the matter is, in the House and the Senate, we have 3Ds sitting there, and they don't have any much power at all. I will say this, that I do know the chairperson of EPW, the senator out of West Virginia, and the senator who is the ranking member of EPW, Environment and Public Works, the senator from Rhode Island, are close colleagues to ex-chairman Carper. And when John Kane has been working on EPW and drafting the Water Resource Development Act, he always pulled in a detail from the Corps of Engineers. The detail he had under the 2022 WERDA mailing from the Corps of Engineers is the advisory staff member to ranking member of that committee. So we do have, some inroads still, and we will have those conversations as best we can. Yes, sir.
Hello. Other than lobbying and praying and holding our breath and stamping our feet, are there things that you can think of that the town of Bethany Beach could do that they're maybe not doing yet, which would improve the situation, like concrete engineering? Just looking for
There's nothing.
an actionable plan.
There really is nothing more that can be done right now, and I say that guardedly, and what I'm about to say has, you have to take this the way I mean this. Your worst enemy but your best friend is a severe coastal storm at this point. It gets attention. And I knew this as a practitioner. I knew that when I had something like Sandy, I had about 2 months to make hay. I knew that I could get a lot done in 2 months, but after 2 months, that's the next disaster. Government is still very reactive. The state right now is reacting to a great diminishment in federal funding across the board. It's education, it's health, it's you name it, highway, it's everything. That's the disaster of the day. And to try to squeak in our need up here in the middle of that conversation right now, it does not go very far. It doesn't mean you stop that conversation. It means you stay shrill as long as you can, but let's manage expectations. In this room, we need to manage expectations. The expectations are that short of another disaster, which I don't hope for, but it does give opportunity, and it does turn up the volume. The heat gets big when that happens, and that's when you can make hay. Be prepared, and you have the short window of time to do that. As far as what the council can do, what the committee can do, it's what you're doing. And having the right personal connections. We do have those right personal connections right now. And we play those cards as best we can. But, the other thing, and say this again with some caution, when I came out of Denrick, Pat Voveris was the mayor of South Bethany. And Pat called me up and said, "You're going to do any consulting work?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it." And she said, "I'd like to talk about the west side of Cat Hill area of South Bethany and the flooding we have off the Aswan Canal and Aswan Bay." And I said, "Sure," but I said, you'd be much better off if you took the other coastal communities around the ocean coast that have similar problems and joined together. And I thought the Association of Coastal Towns was doing a great job as a larger voice. And for a lot of good reasons, logical, practical, pressing needs, ACT has disbanded itself. I'm the executive director of the Bay Beach Association, which goes from Woodland Beach up in Kent County to Lewis, and includes Lewis, it's the whole Bay Beach. Our collective voice has been really loud. So that's the other thing, is looking at where that collective voice can come from. Where is the kinship of communities that have the same problems that create a bigger chorus?
One quick fraction, of course. Are the pipes under John Hudson part of the Bladder Dam, closing those pipes at the same time the Bladder Dam operates?
That's a Cliff question.
Sure. The vast majority, 90% plus of our tidal flooding comes from the Asselman pushed into the loop. The Asselman in the loop actually raised the water in the salt pond before the water infiltrates down to Fred Hudson. So effectively doing that takes care of most of our problem. In a multi-day event with a significant high tide, a gate at the far end near Cotton Patch over two fairly small controllable inlets would help and assist our bladder dam. But initially, for most of the flooding we observe over that 1 or 2 day period, the dam will be sufficient. So Fred Hudson and north of Fred Hudson doesn't flood. Water pushed in from the Asselman into the loop and then into the saw pond is what floods our area.
Yes.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is this even? Yes. Okay. A clarifying question about the Back Bay study. So the funding is there, the study is currently moving forward, and it sounds like they have an idea of projects that they're scoping out for that, or and assessing feasibility of.
Well, it's not quite as far along as it may seem. So the Corps of Engineers, the Back Bay study was authorized from the non-federal partner DENRAC in about 4 or 5 years ago, and it didn't move very far. But the money was secured by the Corps to do that first phase of it, not the whole study, not the project, but to do. They draw down 1 year at a time, basically, for that. The last Water Resources Development Act that was signed into law in November of last year, 24, changed the cost sharing of that to 90-10, and so they're reevaluating. The Corps has to go back and reevaluate to make sure that the benefit they get out of the investment they will make. So they've looked at all the possible investments and then what area. It's a sketchy approach that is internal only to the Corps right now. I'm probably telling you more than I should in this conversation, but they are they've gone to the vertical team to make sure that the North Atlantic Division and the headquarters approve that they should be going forward. They have the right to go forward, and they'll come back to DENRAC and say, okay, here's the revised project partnership agreement, and there's going to have to be another one for the Ocean Coast too, because that cost sharing has changed. They're going to do new PPAs, they call them. So they have internally identified a number of options. And because if you think about it, you look at New Jersey as a whole, and the Delmarva as a whole, we're very similar to New Jersey, where we have a recurving spit at Cape Henlopen, and they've got Sandy Hook, and then we have these headlands that attach as they do up there to Monmouth Headlands, and then you've got long linear barriers. LBI and Assateague are very similar, so we're much like North Jersey, and they've done those studies, so they have a similarity that they can immediately plug in and say, model-wise, it's very similar. What did we do there? What can we do here? So that's where they're in the middle of that process. And they're looking for approval from the vertical team, from headquarters, that yes, proceed and go forward. And that's when they'll come back to DENRAC with a PPA and sign a new PPA.
And at what point do you think, how many years out before you start sharing?
What, I said again?
How many years before you start sharing publicly the study?
Anybody's guess. I don't know. It's predicated on the whether the Corps actually approves what they've got internally and then goes back to DENRAC. I'll give you an example. The Ocean Coast, we have individual project partnership agreements for Rehoboth and Dewey, another one for Bethany, South Bethany, and one for Fenwick. We have another one for Lewis. We have them for Broadkill. We have them for the entire Bay Coast. Because the 2024 were to change everybody's cost share, they all have to be redone. So they're looking at the ones for the Bay Coast that was already in place, and they're revising it, and they're waiting for the Corps to send it over to the state. The state will then review it. Usually the attorneys, more than anybody else, will review, and the back and forth on top of major loads. So, that's what bogs everything down. If I had any idea as to how long that would take, but I just don't. I don't know what else they're up against in North Atlantic Division and headquarters for the entire nation, so.
Tony, if I could, so the Back Bay, as it worked in New Jersey, funded after Sandy, I think they identified 9 to 11 communities from Norfolk up into Connecticut, and Delaware and I think Baltimore were the only 2 people that didn't actively participate. But for Jersey, the Corps identifies an issue or maybe gating the inlet, and they identify that, they decide they want to work with that and design a project. From the time they decide to the time they get to the point in time where they have something they can potentially take to bid is about 3 years. So that's a 3-year time frame. But what you get from that is the project has already been permitted. It is a green light, so if funding ever does become available, then whatever that project has been identified is immediately available to be built. And generally, it's after an event like Sandy that those dollars become available to fund those types of projects. So it isn't that you do the Back Bay study and then the project immediately follows. It sits there permitted and ready for the point in time the funding becomes available.
Which could be a long time.
Which could be a long time.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Tony. That was enlightening. You know, please stay with the meeting if you've got the time.
I'll stay, sure.
Okay. We're going to move on, and Bob, you're going to take over and give us a little report on the water quality in the inland bays. The Center for the Inland Bays maintains a network of sensors and collectors and collects the data for various reports and presentations. Do you want to go ahead with that?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready to go, I guess. And we're going from, I think, a really large-scale overview into a little bit more right on the water. But I'm going to, let's see, is that working? Okay. Yep, so I'm going to talk about our water quality monitoring network that the center is operating here. And I'm duplicating, I'm using a presentation from my colleagues at the center. They are aware of this. I'm not directly involved, although I have done, my name is in the acknowledgments up there, so
For those who don't know, Bob is the director of
manager
of James Farm Preserve back here, which the Center for the Inland Bays operates. And I believe you also are manager of handling the living shorelines.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
Right. And right. And I, of course, a resident of Bethany Beach. There we go. Real quickly, zipping through here about the center. We're a nonprofit established in '94, one of 28 estuary programs. Our mission and our watershed are mentioned there. And I do want to acknowledge the project staff that's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the water quality program. Taylor is on the left, Morgan's on the right. So what is continuous water quality monitoring network? It's a data collection network where we use something called a sonde, and that holds various individual sensors, and they monitor for particular parameters, and it's high frequency data that's collected. What we measure, typically temperature, salinity, dissolved oxygen, pH, turbidity, and chlorophyll in the water. The data is collected every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day through the spring and summer and fall months.
So these are positioned at different locations?
They are located in different positions. I'll show you in a minute. But the sondes are typically deployed 6 inches from the bottom sediment. And in addition to that, they are visited regularly for maintenance. They need cleaning. And at that time, grab measurements, that are actually, grabbed from the water and taken back to the lab, or are measured with handheld meters. And we also have a vigorous QA/QC quality assurance system that goes on with it. Yeah, this isn't going to be on the test. But it just it shows the that there is a it shows that we do have a vigorous, robust quality assurance program in the project. And these kind of show what the regulatory standards are here for making sure that the parameters are met. These are the stations that are out there now, with the exception of Love Creek. It says planned in '25. I am under the. I understand that it has been deployed at this point, but there are a number of stations out around the bays and collecting data 24 hours a day. So what do we need water quality monitoring network? Well, obviously we want to get an indicator of the quality of the water that we have out there as measured in those parameters I mentioned earlier. We want to be able to monitor water for our management activities that are out in the bays. We do share our data, particularly with EPA, with the state EPA TMDL compliance. And we do get a number of requests for data from various academians and others throughout the year. One of the things that we do with our water quality measurements is we do use that as a parameter in our state of the bays, which happens every 5 years. Typically what we're seeing on it is the water in this particular parameter is it's an overall averaging of the water quality out there. We in the last state of the bays we gave the water a D. I think going forward we're going to be getting away from the letter grades, although they're easy for the general public to focus on. We want to start looking more at the individual parameters that are going to be going on in here, but that's kind of an aside on here. One of the other parameters that we look at, and this is one of the most important ones, is the dissolved oxygen. And what this this continuous monitoring shows us is patterns like this, where we have severe cycling of hypoxia in the water. Hypoxia is characterized as low oxygen in the water. Every night it dips, and it's got to do with if you go back to your high school biology, photosynthesis and respiration. Long and the short is in the morning. Typically, in warmer conditions, there's a severe lack of dissolved oxygen in the water, and that has a big effect on aquatic animals, fish kills, that type of thing in there. Benthic organisms are the ones that are in the ground under the water. They typically can't move and can be killed. Fish kills, and having this kind of data also helps you explain them, and it also it helps us observe algal blooms, crimson tide, red tides, those kinds of things that happen in the waters here.
So low oxygen is in the morning, or?
Typically, it's in the morning, yes, and because the the algae, which is a plant, will only synthesize when sun is present, sunlight is present, and the byproduct of that is oxygen, which gets dissolved into the water and therefore available to the aquatic organisms. At night, when there is no when there is no photosynthesis going on, there's still respiration, and what's going to happen then is it gets used up by the other plants and animals that are in there, typically plants. So our water quality monitoring lets us monitor the water, and again, three of the benefits of it are up there. And more about fish kills, that type of thing. So, you know, we do monitor from April through November. We get a new set of readings every 15 minutes from 2004 on. The sondes did go in the water in the last couple of weeks, so we are actively monitoring for this season. You know, this is up here. You know, this data is available to a number of entities here. You know, particularly for the state for assessing our total maximum daily loads, particularly you know, assessing those. Another use for it that we found in the last couple of years, you know, we monitor most of our projects before and after, you know, two projects in particular that we're working on now are artificial oyster reefs and SAV, which is submerged aquatic vegetation. Let's do SAV first, and they're basically vascular plants that grow completely underwater. In the past, our bays had lots of eelgrass, widgeon grass out there. They're essentially gone right now, and we are in the process of trying to reestablish them in various areas. You know, what is SAV? Again, it's it's a vascular plant that grows in the water, and it has numerous benefits. It helps with clarity, all these other things in through here. Important fish habitat, fish and invertebrate habitat, crabs, and it does give us some protection on the shoreline. Also anchors sediment. Not going any further? Huh?
I did it.
Should be more. There we go. So, anyway, for SAV, we've tried. We began in 2023 monitoring various sites that we're trying to establish. Much of it in Little Asswoman Bay, but also near Pasture Point at the James Farm. This year we're going to try to do up in Love Creek, some other places there. We'll be planting the seeds in there. Also with monitoring for SAVs, some of the information we try to get ahead of time. We're looking at the amount of percent light that goes through water. Temperature is very important. Salinity, dissolved oxygen, and some of these other things. Also with our oyster and shellfish enhancement programs, it's really important to know the water quality and to try to predict what's going to be going on out there. This is the drawing of our pasture point artificial reef. I don't like that term, but I don't know of a better one. But we've done substantial monitoring of the water in that area so that we think it gives us a good opportunity for these structures to succeed.
Are these, I'm sorry, just had a question, but the oyster reefs are they the oyster shells that come from the restaurants?
We use those oyster shells from our Don't Chuck Your Shucks program. We collect them, cure them in a location around here, and yeah, quite a bit. I believe it was 12 truckloads of oyster shell that was brought to our staging area and brought out and actually dumped in the water to create these oyster reefs. So we often get the question, why do we want to restore oysters? There's habitat benefit, water quality. We've all heard that oysters filter water. The number that often gets thrown around is 50 gallons of water per day. I'm not sure that the science actually comes up with that number, but it does. They do filter the water. Historically, there were oysters in these waters, and then you get some other benefits, carbon sequestration, nutrient capture, possibly some shoreline protection out of it.
As a quick comment on that, I was talking to Ed Hale with the University of Delaware last week. He's the one in charge of aquaculture for the University of Delaware. And I was asking him how because the state is promoting people getting into the oyster business, which is a very difficult business to be in, very tough and demanding. But he has... they've actually increased this year. He indicated there were 3 more vendors that came on line this year with permits. These are up in the just north of the inlet, where the state has set out tracks that the oyster vendors, oyster watermen, can set up their cages, and they grow the oysters out there. It's a very fascinating business. I had a chance to go out, and it's a growing industry. We have one in our farmers market in town if you come by. So I'm just putting a plug in for the farmers market here. But we do have one who does grow their oysters right up here in Rehoboth Bay.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's a good aside. And we do believe that more oysters, more shellfish in the water are going to help improve our water quality out there. So
We absolutely do. I mean, actually being out on the tracks, it's incredible how clear the water is right where the oysters are being.
Yeah. If you look at the picture up there, this is a part of our dog and pony show. The lower picture is an aquarium that we have divided in half. And on one side we put the oysters, and the other side it's just clear water. And you can see it clear up really before your very eyes. And it does. When you're out on those oyster leases and you look down, it is much clearer than the rest of the water. So, again, how do we measure success? Well, we do it by monitoring, and water quality is one of the parameters that we're really interested in. And with that, again, I don't want to take the credit for my colleagues here. They put in a lot of hard work on these, but I did want to bring that to your attention here for the meeting today. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. That's great.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I didn't like that D rating, the grade, we don't look too good. I assume most of that's because of runoff with phosphorus and nitrogen. And if that's true, why aren't you measuring those?
We do measure those.
Oh, okay, I just didn't see it.
And some of those, a lot of them are by proxy. For instance, with the chlorophyll in the water, which is basically phytoplankton, and again, it's a proxy. When you see a water body like this, that it's typically plant dominated.
Is that the cause of runoff from lawns and farms and stuff, or something else?
That's certainly a contributor of it.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's not just a one thing point at it. I mean, you also have septic, you have agriculture. There's a certain amount of atmospheric deposition, of particularly of nitrogen. But it's, do we like the D number? No. And there's a lot. I like to say that it's an integrated approach to solving our water problems. But we've done a lot over the last number of years here. That we are at a D is, well, we didn't sink to flunking, but there is room for improvement.
Thanks.
Do I have any other questions? Okay, thank you, Bob. That was great. I'm going to move along. I've got a couple of things I just wanted to talk about briefly. One of them was what Tony discussed a little bit, is the Seaside Statewide Economic Study, a very important and enlightening study of the importance of the economy in the coastal areas and how it relates to the entire state, which is dramatic. This area is extremely important to the state. It is actually, if not taken over from agriculture, it is certainly equal to agriculture in being the #1 industry in the state of Delaware. Of course, incorporating in the state of Delaware probably brings in more money than anything else, but this is by far one of the most important. If somebody would like a copy, I've got some here. These have been being distributed across the state. We've had opportunities in Sussex County. We have had a number of opportunities where we've distributed it to legislators and people who are in positions that can make a difference. So the more we get the word out, the better it is. And I think people in high places, including Matt Meyer, and of course our head of DENEREC, Greg Patterson, are well aware of it. So the next thing I want to touch on is the town of Bethany has been working with an engineer who has put together a sea level rise study, which is still not complete. I have a draft version here, but it is getting close to being complete, and I think we will probably have some sort of presentation, public forum when it comes out, just so that people are aware of it and what it has to say about Bethany and our future, and what are certain steps that can be taken and should be taken, looking ahead multiple years into the future over things which Tony was alluding to too, that the seas are rising, very much so. So that is in the works and coming up well. Cliff, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few comments on ongoing projects.
Ongoing projects, one that we hope comes to fruition this fall is the reestablishing the banks along the Loop Canal in Lake Bethany. There's about 850 linear feet on the loop side that needs to be restored with bulkhead, and on the lake side, about 650 feet with a living shoreline, if you will. Most of the work is done. We're at the very end of the permitting process. We hope to have bid documents out this summer and see work on the project this fall. It's needed because of the serious erosion on the loop Again, right there as it comes in off the asphalt, and the force going past that existing shoreline is causing it to degrade. We're having trees fall into the loop canal, and it creates quite a problem for what's a very productive heron rookery. So we hope to have that restored here in the fall. The second item, going on much longer than we had hoped it would as regards to the permitting for the Loop Canal Dam. We had hit sort of a dead end in working with DENREC, but with the change in administration, we had a recent dialogue at an executive level with members of DENREC, and we hope to see a reassessment of our initial permitting application sometime in the future, which would help to move the project along. We also have an issue or two to resolve with the U.S. Corps regarding an established deed with DENREC when the Corps turned the property over to DENREC some many decades ago that will need DENREC's help to resolve also, and we hope that's forthcoming. Significant sea change with the administration of DENREC, and we're very, very happy for Tony's work with us in that regard. And Mayor, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Anybody have any questions? Matt, I'm going to have you talk a little bit about the Bethany Homeowners Help the Town Fight Flooding Initiative, which we have pamphlets out about and have, this has been going on for almost 2 years now. There are pamphlets available out in the lobby. This is steps that you can take on your property, things that you can do to help our town, which, as you know, has many challenges, and we all play a part. So,
Thank
got
you.
some thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, so the pamphlet program, we basically run that during the fall and the winter and the spring, not in the summer because there's more tourists that aren't really interested in that. And we've had some great success. We've really burned through, I don't even know how many pamphlets, but a lot.
Couple thousand.
Yeah, it has been, okay, a couple thousand. And we continue to have it out probably through up to Memorial Day.
Coming up.
So, yes, Mother's Day is coming up, so that's probably a busy weekend too.
But everybody's got a part, so please pick one up and please look on your lot and see what you can do to help. That's pretty much everything we have to discuss today. Is there any comments? Anybody like to say anything further? I thank you for coming. I want to thank Tony for coming by. That was excellent. That was most enlightening. Thank Bob for your thoughts and analysis there on the bays. And thank everybody for coming, and thanks for everybody who is watching online. Thank you very much.